Welcome to Recovery Comes Home Radio, your go-to podcast for all things related to addiction recovery. Whether you are an individual in recovery, a concerned loved one, or a dedicated professional, this podcast is tailored just for you. Here we are all about empowering you with the tools, insights, and inspiration you need to move forward. So grab your headphones, tune in, and let's embark on this transformative journey together. Well, welcome everyone to another episode of Recovery Comes Home Radio. Today, I have the pleasure of announcing my good friend. We've met in a mutual group and then got to know each other on a more personal level. But today, Avigail is going to talk to us about ADHD, and then we're going to go into some ways that ADHD and addiction overlap and that they have some of the same common symptoms. So with that, Abigail, please come on and tell us your story. We'd love to hear from you.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. Our encounters so far have been so fascinating. You're an amazingly interesting woman. And I've just learned so much from you, and I'm looking forward to learning even more from you in this conversation. And,
that's great.
A little bit about myself. Well, first and foremost, I'm a mom. I've got 6 amazing children, and my kids really have raised me, because each and every one of them was diagnosed with ADHD at some point. And my youngest, who wasn't actually diagnosed with ADHD, diagnosed herself so that the teacher would let her walk around the classroom. So she's way cleverer than everybody else around her. So because of their needs, and I'm a special education teacher, college lecturer, and my children kind of inspired me to take a really deep dive into the ADHD story and figure out what was going on for them and how I could help them best. So I've written 2 books recently. One of them is a bestseller on Amazon. Super exciting. And it really spells out a full treatment plan. And we actually were talking in our last conversation about how ADHD and addiction overlap. And first of all, my own personal history growing up is that I dealt with a parent who had addiction. So I went to AA meetings a lot. I went to Al-Anon a little bit until I was too opinionated and they didn't like my views. It's better to write books because then no one's answering. You just say
That's right. That's right.
No one could kick you out. But it was definitely eye-opening. And so I have that addiction background, and as well as I spent a good bit of time in my book talking about screen addiction, pornography addiction, and other addictions that overlap dramatically with ADHD symptoms as well. So that's why I was so excited to have this conversation with you.
Yes, totally. We have a lot of our residents over the years that just struggle with dual diagnosis in general, but particularly ADHD, because some of the symptoms overlap so much. There's that thrill-seeking behavior, the immediate gratification, sometimes the mania. And what we found is that a lot of times they're just trying to mask the symptoms, aren't they?
It is possible. Some of the symptoms are really hard to live with, especially if you are an instant gratification seeker, like you just mentioned, and you're stuck in a classroom and there's very little instant gratification, fun, interesting, clever things going on around you, and you're bored stiff, you're not succeeding, everyone's down on you. Life's not going well, and you feel like a loser. So going and finding something to cover the pain is certainly a likely scenario. But I would think just the fact that the person is an instant gratification seeker, they're going to land up tripping on addictive substances quicker than the rest of society. They're more curious, they're probing, they're also more willing to take risks. So
absolutely.
Put all that together and you land up with ADHD diagnosis, definitely, and following close behind it, you might land up with addiction. I'm seeing it a lot with screen addiction. Most of my clients and a lot of my students have serious screen addictions, and it's not even specifically a boy-girl thing with pornography addiction, that they're the first to fall.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because a lot of people think addiction and they only think substances. They only think drugs or alcohol. And today we have something that the Diagnostics and Statistical Manual for Mental Health, it labels it as a disorder.
The screen addiction.
The screen addiction it's a process addiction. or a behavioral addiction, let's say, rather than a substance addiction.
Right.
But it's an addiction nonetheless. And we've got men that are addicted to Call of Duty, and their wives and families are leaving them.
Oh, what a disaster. Yeah, sure.
Because they're spending their time with another family.
Right.
In all intents and purposes, because they've made their Call of Duty family the people that they talk with and the people that they actually show themselves to and are intimate with.
That's wild. Yeah, it's very, very dangerous. And I find I work a lot with teenage boys, and I find that one after the next, their screens are the center of their lives. And we clock in how many hours they're on their screens every day. And it's not all this nefarious stuff. Some of it's just regular garbage. And some of them will clock in at 10, 11 hours a day.
Wow.
And they also are going to school or have a job. So I'm not sure when they do all of that, but and we have to rein that in order for them to be productive. But I find that overall, I've been working with ADHD and students with disabilities for 25 years. And so I've been watching the generations pass. And I make myself sound so old there. But I have been seeing, and what I'm seeing, and like really the plague of these kids is with these serious addictions is that they become so passive. Nothing interests them. They're not drawn in by anything. They're not even looking anymore. They just keep shooting themselves up with this screen heroin, and they're no longer fully alive. It's tragic.
Well, addiction hijacks your prefrontal cortex. And
right, so that's what I'm saying.
Yes. And then you're left with just the limbic system, which is fight, flight, or freeze.
Right.
Most of them are in a lull. I agree with you. It's frightening. Last Christmas, we went to meet our nephew, and we were meeting his sons for the first time, our great nephews. And they were 15 and 17. And we asked them at the table about fentanyl. And yes, they had heard of it, but no, they weren't scared of it.
Really?
It's become a norm. And Jim asked them, have you had friends that have passed away from an overdose? And they're like, oh, yeah. And he says, and it still doesn't scare you? No, not really. It's just part of life.
Yeah, it's a scary time. My brother actually works with addiction. He has a few homes. I mentioned that to you. So he's doing great work with them. But just a couple of days ago, he went to the graveyard to visit a couple of his previous charges.
Right.
I don't know what we call them. They're not students. He's a therapist. Clients that he just went to just be by their side for a few minutes each, but it wiped him out clear. They all overdosed. And that's something I remember. The one guy who overdosed when I was growing up, there was that one, but
not one overdose.
Common now.
No, and since the pandemic, overdose, addiction, alcoholism, domestic violence, suicide are all up off the charts.
Right. Yeah. And, you and I have to pool our resources and help people that are really desperate.
So what was the impetus that led you to go down this rabbit hole of ADHD and healing? I know you're boys, but was it just that somebody wanted to drug them up and you didn't want that, or you wanted to just explore all your options?
Well, I'm a very curious person. I like to really understand what's going on. So I had already been a special education teacher, and I had students who were prescribed Ritalin. This is back, with my second job 23 years ago. And I just kind of thought it curious. I said, you know what, your kids seem healthy. Why don't we hold off on the prescription and see what's going on for them. And they did very well in my classroom. We found a way to get along. They were learning well. I developed a whole system for them in the classroom, and they were really chugging. They were happy. They were happy to be there. And then when my kids were starting to be prescribed with Ritalin, we got handed this prescription. And I had 100 questions to ask. Is it addictive? What happens short-term, long-term? Let's say the kid doesn't take it. Is that very detrimental? Is there really something wrong with my kid's brain? I had never-ending questions, and no one had the patience to answer it. And the schools were really breathing down my neck and saying, get your kid on this pill. So I did. And I put 3 of my kids, 2 girls and 1 boy, on medication. I don't like to call it medication, on these drugs. And watching what's happening to them. And besides for my initial questions, they're not happier. They're not more effective. They're making everyone around them happier because the teacher is not disciplining them as much, or doesn't have to hear their voice in the background, or doesn't have to deal with them getting up and walking around. So the teacher is much happier. I kept getting messages from the teacher, your kid's doing great. And then I remember this one teacher, she said, listen, you got to put your kid on. I said, let's make a deal. I'm going to put her on from the beginning of the school year, from September straight through to Hanukkah. And at Hanukkah, I want to reevaluate, see what's going on. And so teacher says, great. And she keeps sending me these glowing reports about my kid. And I'm not feeling like she's learning more. And I'm feeling like she comes home from school, she's a little down. And this is just a happy kid. So
Right.
I go into school then, the early December, mid-December, and I pull out all of her notebooks and her workbooks, and they're empty. She'd done nothing for half a year. But the teacher was thrilled because she had straitjacketed my child. And she was no more intelligent. She had not learned anything more. And I was distraught by that. So that's when I said, okay, I've got to get my questions answered. And I knew I couldn't rely on the pediatrician and the school system. So that's when I really started doing the research and just came up with some fabulous stuff. Actually, they're not really finding the brain imbalance, and that these drugs are not correcting an imbalance, but rather they're doing something completely different in the brain. And at that point, when I started really learning what was going on, I decided on my own to take the kids off of the drugs, and they've been flourishing since.
Yeah, we actually do not accept any of those categories of drugs. Not the Ritalin, can't remember the other one off the top of my head. But anyway, those are barbiturates at their core, and could be very addictive, especially if you don't have ADHD and you take them.
Well, I don't know that that's correct, because you have a lot of college students who are taking it without having ADHD. And since it's not correcting a brain imbalance, it can't do that. Anyone is going to have a rebound effect. And just about anyone who starts on it, whether they've been diagnosed or not, will land up addicted to it if they stick with it for long enough. And even if they don't feel the need for it, they don't want to have another hit of methylphenidate, their brain is going to be asking for it because it's caused an imbalance.
Yes, I agree with you totally.
The dopamine system.
Yeah, hijacks the dopamine system.
It hijacks the dopamine system, and therefore your body needs help now. You had a healthy body and mind, and then you went ahead and had the dopamine system hijacked, and now your body must have it in order to function properly. And I didn't want to break my kids' brains. I wanted to keep them intact once I realized that they were healthy.
So what have you found that works? Is it cognitive behavioral therapy? Is it a reward system? Is it a combination? Tell us a little bit about that.
So I start by trying to figure out what it is that's sitting at the root cause, at the root of what's going on for a person struggling with ADHD symptoms. The reason I did that is because I discovered that, let's say a kid is diagnosed with celiac. Very likely he's going to also have ADHD symptoms, but we're going to say that they're comorbid, two just separate things, unrelated. But the minute we start treating the child for the celiac, take out the gluten, upgrade the diet, cure the gut, the ADHD symptoms come down. We also have kids who are pumped up with tons of antibiotics as a child, and then they land up also with a gut dysbiosis. So that's just one example. I'm also looking at sleep, at screens, at outdoors time. If it's an instant gratification personality, that child's healthy but needs to have more healthy habits. Right. They want the here and now and fun and interesting, so they're not getting up in the morning unless I'm taking them to Six Flags. They're not moving unless there's something exciting happening in their lives. And you can't really live life that way. Like, no. We have to help these kids develop healthy habits. And I think a lot of the kids who land up with addictions afterwards didn't really understand the root cause of their challenges and were not able to overcome them, and therefore are in a really deep, dark place.
Absolutely. And then the only thing that's left in that deep, dark place is to numb.
Exactly.
And duck and run and hide.
All of that. So if it's instant gratification personality, then we're looking at, first of all, communication. We, as the adults around the children, the teachers, the aunts, uncles, and parents, all of those need to really be upgrading their communication with the kids, meaning that these kids need our attention. They need a lot of strong response from their environment, and we're their environment. So we need to learn how to communicate in a loving and a kind and affirming way, and really bonding with them where they're strong. We also need to learn to discipline in a highly respectful way, but we can't skip discipline, because that's another thing that happens with these kids. We're like, we shouldn't expect too much of them. And then they feel like losers. Why are you not expecting anything of me? I'm capable.
Right.
And then I'm saying, no, you're not capable. I don't want to bother you by disciplining you. So we need the discipline, and we also need the behavior modification, which is the skills training. And the more skills that people with ADHD symptoms learn, the better off they're going to be, and they'll be ready and prepared for adult life in a balanced way.
Great. You touched on it a little bit earlier, but about 24% of boys and men and about 18% of girls and women who have ADHD also struggle with addiction. Can you tell us about some of those steps that you took with your students? And what things did you see that actually worked to free that prefrontal cortex and free the hijack of the dopamine?
Well, the hijack of the dopamine only happens if they're taking some kind of stimulant or some kind of pill for their ADHD. Usually the dopamine should be working very well. And I actually did not know that statistic. It's very high.
It is.
It makes perfect sense to me, and it's very high. What we need to be doing is balancing, and this is what I've done in the classroom also with my own children, is a balancing between this incredible need for stimulation and novelty, which is great. And I celebrate it with my students, because they're the future inventors and the CEOs and the entrepreneurs,
the dreamers and
the artists. Like, we need these guys and girls, like, stick around and keep your magic on the one hand. On the other hand, we have to help them be able to follow through. And that's where that's when we roll up our sleeves and get busy, because the follow through means that's where exactly they're terrible. They have the idea, they have the inspiration, they share it with everybody, and then it fades off. So therefore, that's where I'm going to make behavior charts for them and help them, first of all, define what they need to do. I'm trying to help them develop higher level thinking of defining the problem, breaking it down, being aware of the emotional response that they're going to have to it. This is too big. This is too scary. I'm going to encourage them to reach out for help as well.
Yeah, and trust the process, right?
Trust the process, but also you're not a all-contained perfect human. There are no people like that. The accountant who's great at finishing the process needs somebody with inspiration hanging nearby. We need to work together with each other. And therefore, I'm encouraging them to identify when it's too hard for them. And then either they can choose to break it down to smaller parts, which we work on a lot, or to go get help, or both. But what I'm doing is always bringing them awareness of their process, and always bringing them awareness that they don't have to be perfect. Their goal is to take one step today, which is very similar to the healing for addiction. But our goal is one step. Our goal is to do stronger today than yesterday. Our goal is to have made a good choice. We talk about choices, and that we are capable of making choices. We don't let life travel by us. We're grabbing on and saying, I choose to take a left here and I want to take a right there. And it's a long and a beautiful process. There's a lot of fall back to where you were. It's never, and that's what I tell my clients all the time, whenever you feel like you're falling back, you're never landing up at baseline, ever, because you're so much stronger now. Your capacity to develop a habit and to think through a thought and to make a plan or to ask for help are so much better now than they were 2 months ago when you began, or whenever it is that you started. And with those steps, we have less of a chance of turning to substances and alcohol. But I also, by the way, in terms of the phone addiction, I'm very clear with everyone I meet on this. You're not strong enough to protect yourself from a phone or pornography addiction, because there are a lot of really, really smart men and women sitting around a table trying to figure out how to make you as addicted as possible.
Absolutely.
So therefore, you don't stand a chance, and therefore get help. I put Custodio, I put protections on my kids' phones, on my own phone, to make sure that we're limiting our hours. because we can't do that ourselves. It's too massive.
It is.
And it's not an admittance of failure when you protect yourselves and your children. No child should be walking around with an open smartphone. That is just like it's like opening up the alcohol cabinet and saying, go to town, have fun, child of 7, enjoy the alcohol.
Right. And so many people I know have just allowed their phones to babysit their children.
Yes, and I understand it. We have a very busy household here. There's just a lot of people around, and it would be nice to take a 2-hour break. But that's not why we became parents, and I understand why people do it, but we have to do better. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, we have to do better. We have to raise the bar.
Yeah.
And that's why I want to bring so much awareness.
Yeah, and good for you. It's amazing what you're doing. You and your husband both, I understand.
And well, yes, we started the lodge together, and now we're doing Recovery Comes Home, which is our virtual program for the 80% of people who graduate treatment and don't come to a facility like ours. And
that is so amazing.
It really has been eye-opening, and we approach it like a make it available. We make the options available and do teach them life skills. Actually, the average age of people coming out of treatment is 24. So it's young, and 24 today is not what 24 used to be.
No, I was finished with my master's at 24. I don't think that we used to move very quickly.
Right. Things move very, very quickly. And we just didn't, honestly, Abigail, we just didn't have the substances and the dangers around us that are around our children today.
Yeah, it's very daunting raising, actually write about that in my book, how we as parents, this generation, we had no idea what we were getting into with the amount of addictive substances and screens that were going to be available to all our children. We didn't even know that we were supposed to be protecting them, let alone how to do that.
Right. We didn't know. Now it seems like what we need to do is get in there and teach those life skills and teach them healthy coping mechanisms to deal with life stressors, because it isn't a matter of if something's going to come down your pike. It's just when. Life is hard, but it can be made better. What strategies have you found worked for the transition for someone with ADHD from young adult to adulthood?
What's very important for me, just to begin with, before I even start with the skills, is to make sure that person has some kind of partner, someone who's cheering them on, because ADHD does better with company. And I try to make sure, and I might be that person. For some of my clients, they reach out to me with their successes and with their confusion, and I'm available to them. And some of them I'll have a spouse or a best friend, but they always have to have somebody to be cheering them on, accompanying them, being proud of them. Then we get into trying to figure out, before we even get to the behaviors, we try to figure out what emotional stressors, especially for the older teenagers and into adulthood, what are the emotional stressors that are causing you to have untrue beliefs about yourself. So all those voices, not because you're schizophrenic, but because we all have voices in our head.
That's right.
You're not successful. You'll never make it. I was speaking to someone who had been punished as a child by having to sleep in the bathroom because the message was, you're as valuable as stuff in the toilet, basically. I'm not going to use that language here for the sake of your podcast, but this is the message, and this is a wonderful, capable person, and you want to help that person change habits. You can't do that until they stop believing that they really are the person who should be sleeping in the bathroom, because that's their home. And so we have to dig back to that, and we have to uncover these fake ideas that we had about ourselves, and we all have them. Once we've done that, once we've uncovered them and we've been able to soothe ourselves and understand we're not that, then we start creating the me. Who am I? And I really plug away at my clients. I'll have them write down 10 times a day what I want, what I need, what's interesting to me, what drew me in today. Not to become narcissistic, but to take away, I've created a void by taking away those voices that were a lie, that weren't really them, And now we have to
Right.
fill it up with what is really me. Once I know who I am, I'm in a very, very good place to start creating habits. I use charts to create
Absolutely.
habits, and I use also affirmations. We use mantras also for the emotional affirmations as you're creating the habits. We always have prizes, adults and children alike. Everyone gets prizes that they love. And then we also are working in parallel on an exercise program, on cleaning up the diet, on creating better relationships, and on learning how to make schedules, divide and conquer your day, and celebrate each step you take.
Yeah. Even the small celebrations are important, aren't they?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that we all need to be doing it. I meet with young moms a lot, and they're so down on themselves because, the kid went to sleep crying, or, they expected some perfect picture that they watched in sitcoms. They should all be burnt down, all those sitcoms. And then this poor woman that I met, she's trying to get her son to sit at the dinner table, and he's 4. He doesn't want to sit at the dinner table, and she's so down on herself. Why is he not sitting at the dinner table? Finally, I said to her, your home is not a sitcom. He's 4. He's
Right.
done eating. He's not going to say clever little sentences now that you can have a laugh track about. He doesn't want to sit there. That's a normal, healthy child. So I definitely want to help people be in this reality and be celebrating the fact that he came for dinner and ate it. That's wonderful. Good for you. Now let him go play, and you and your husband will attempt a conversation. But be proud of yourself.
Be proud of yourself. And they say that if you want self-esteem, do esteemable things.
Nice. I like that.
Because listen, none of us get self-esteem from other people doing for us what we could do for ourselves.
Absolutely right. And you said something that just reminded me of something else we really try to do, which is get people to volunteer, to find things that are meaningful to them,
Yes.
and to fill their time with things that make them proud of themselves. So we do. I know I take my kids to volunteer a lot, but I encourage it all the time.
We have a recovery compass that we take our clients around, and that's one of the things that we cover as well. I feel it's very important. We put it under the M of the compass, under mentoring and service, but the
Nice.
importance of having a mentor and then the importance of giving back.
That's beautiful. That's fantastic. It's such a powerful step in healing.
Well, we're running out of time, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to give a final thought to our audience.
Well, I would say that we're raising a generation that's different than ourselves, and wasn't all flowers and beautiful for most of us either. But I think that this particular generation needs a lot more love and affirmation and understanding. And I think that we're no longer in a place where we can just tell the people what to do and expect them to do it. If we're really going to reach them, we have to answer why. Why is this important? Why do I
Right.
need this? And really connect with the people around us in a much more meaningful way. I think that and I'm happy about this, that people have just lost respect for do this because I say so kind of
That's
stuff.
right.
And they really need to be vibrant within their journey. Also, it's very important for me as a mom, as a professional, as a college lecturer and a writer, it's very important to me to be knowing that I'm on a journey every day, and knowing that there's always room for improvement, but I have to be happy with myself. I have to be enjoying the process. And when younger people come to me and ask me about, what they should do with their lives, I said, gone are the days where you get an apprenticeship and you just do the thing that makes the most money, or that your mother always dreamed you would do. In my case, we all had to be doctors and lawyers, but I escaped that by becoming a teacher. But those days are gone. You have to follow your passion. The more connected we are to ourselves, to the people around us, the more real relationships we have, the more we really know ourselves, the less likely it's going to be that we're going to turn to drugs and alcohol and other addictive substances. And we're going to be able to lead a much more stable life, and connecting also to our faith, and whichever faith it is, gives us more meaning. And living as part of a community is also extremely powerful. But my final thought, which I usually begin with, is that we have to know that we're healthy. We should not begin with I am my diagnosis. I have a diagnosis, but I don't embody my diagnosis. It's kind of like a coat that's been put on me, and I don't have to be that. I can be a healthy person who's strong, who overcomes, who sometimes falls, who's taking a journey. Journeys are messy, but I'm healthy.
Right. The journey's always messy in the middle.
Yeah. Oh, it's terrible. And you know what? You know Hebrew. I'm going to send you a beautiful song about that.
Oh, nice, nice. Well,
Yeah.
I really, really appreciate your time today. And I just know that our listeners are going to get a lot of value out of what you said here. And I can't wait to have you back on the show.
Thank you so much. Such a pleasure. And I wish you an incredible amount of luck. You're just doing God's work. You are helping raise his children in the healthiest way possible. And you should just have a tremendous amount of success in all you do.
Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in to another episode of Recovery Comes Home Radio. We will see you next time. Thank you for tuning in to Recovery Comes Home Radio. We hope that today's episode has provided you with valuable information and insights on the recovery process. Remember, you are not alone on this journey. Keep seeking support, practicing self-care, and moving forward one step at a time. Until next time, stay strong, stay resilient, and stay humble. Hope lives here.